Okay, let's get back to the D3 and what we can do with it in this case. So we will start with the simple steps, and then we will get some data in here and checking how data is connected to the shapes and how to create them and so on. Well, I will start by removing all the information about these SVGs in here. And I will use as an example, and also this is again the way I'm adding or giving a place for the charts is to placing something called div. I think the div as a tag, it comes from the word divider, so it divides some kind of space from this HTML file. All right, so now I have something on my page, and if I'm saying Control S, I will. Oh, oops, think the actual page is in here. Yeah, you can see that there is this div right now. I'm closing that one. I'm also removing the image.svg in here because we don't need it anymore. So delete, move to trash. So, okay, so now we are going to jump into the coding section, really. So we are going into the script.js file and start typing some code in there. And this line in here connects that information that from script.js there will be something that this page should know and use all the things or make all the things that script.js commands. Okay, so usually when we are dealing with the HTML page, which shows the content on a web browser, and trying to make JavaScript affect to something inside that page, we need to know that there is that something, and that something is that div tag we just created. So um, there is a couple of ways to get that information that we have that div tag. And I'm using the old way and a D3 way. So if I'm saying that const, this means constant. It's I'm giving a name for this div tag in this code because well, I'm calling it simply A. This is the name for the information. And that is something that can be found from document, which means the HTML page. And I'm using this kind of query selector. So select something called div. In here, we are not using those smaller than and bigger than signs. So I'm trying to find div from that HTML document, and if I find that, I will store that information inside the variable or constant a. Okay, then I'm putting this, oops, lines usually end with a semicolon. Okay, and then I'm pressing Ctrl S, Command S in my case. And if I like to know, did I found that div and is it placed inside that symbol A? I can ask console dot log A, and again semicolon in here. Well, how can I see if that's happening? There is a thing called console in each browser. It depends which browser you are using. It might be here at the bottom of the browser window, or then it might be on the right side. Well, quite rarely on the left side, or even more rarely at the top, usually on the right side or at the bottom. And if I'm saying inspect in here, you can see the element page as we have already seen, but then there is a console. And in here, it says that from line 2 in file called script.js, we will find this kind of information. So the console.log writes into the console the information that is carried by that constant A. So, well, this is a pure JavaScript, but now when we are using D3, it goes like this. Well, I'm using another constant. I cannot use the same name for this information. So D3 dot select then parentheses and quotation marks, and same thing. I'm trying to find a div, and it looks for the same div element in the index.html as the first line. So the same information is stored in A and B. Now if I say like this, A, comma, B inside this console log. So there is still, even though we are kind of making the same thing, we will get the different answer in here. So select in D3, it uses this query selector behind the scenes, but if you log that information into the console, you will see this kind of view. There is a lot of information about what's going on here. So in here you can find that, well, it is a div that we were looking for. And then there is a lot of information about how we can act with that div. We can do all the things that are shown here for this A as well, even though it's done in a pure JavaScript way, even though it doesn't show that there is a lot of tricks inside that. But that's the difference between kind of the same thing, but D3.select it digs or presents so much more information about that simple div element. Okay, well, what can we do with, or what is that information for? Why do we need to grab from that div element? Well, because now if we know that there is something called div, which is empty space on a page, now we can create a structure of SVG structure inside that div. And now I will change the code a little bit. I will remove, first of all, this old-fashioned way, and then I will show a couple of more things about the selection. Well, again, many of you are not familiar with the HTML and what happens in here. Sorry for that, but this is part of the course. You can add something called class for every element in here. Now I'm adding class called it's called, for example, canvas, or you can at the same time add an ID. I'm using the same word in here as well. So ID gives an unique name for this div. You cannot use the ID canvas anywhere else in HTML, in the same HTML file. So this means that I can use the ID canvas to call or to find this same div element here. So if I'm going in here and instead of div, because there might be a multiple divs in the same HTML document, to be sure that I'm selecting the correct one, I can use the ID. And in here, the tree.select, I'm not typing ID equals something, but I'm using this hash symbol to say that I'm looking for ID, and hash canvas, like so. Now it says that there is no A, as it is. There is no A, there is only B. So again, I will get a selection, opening that one, and then group shows that there is div which has an ID canvas, and at the same time it has also a class called canvas. So this dot in here equals to class attribute. Hash sign equals to ID, and this dot equals to class. So I can use also that syntax in here. So if I'm looking by using class, I'm saying dot canvas, and I will get exactly the same information in here. Div ID canvas, class canvas, selection. It's exactly to the same point in here. There is even it looks like, to use class or to use ID or to use, there is a big difference between ID and class. As I said, you cannot use this word canvas in any other IDs in this document. It's always unique, and it's an error if you are using the same ID in a different places on a page. But the class is much more flexible, so you can use the same class equals to canvas attribute in many places in the code, but ID is always unique. So ID is usually used to pick something from the HTML document and giving that information to the JavaScript code. Okay, so actually I'm not needing anymore that class canvas. That was only for the explaining how to pick things in there. And now I saved that one. And now when I removed the class equals to canvas, I'm trying to look for that. As you can see, the first line says D3 select dot canvas. It gives a selection here in console, but when you open the groups part of it, there is no canvas, there is only null. So it says that it didn't find anything. Okay, so let's use the hash sign. Now there should be that div again. Yep. Okay, so as I said, the D3 is used for drawing SVG information on this web page and how to make that happen. Well, now when we know that canvas is actually that div element on a page, we can create an SVG inside that div, and that can be done in this way. I'm saying that there is something that I'm calling SVG. At the same time, I'm creating the SVG tag to the inside the canvas element, and at the same time, I'm placing this variable inside computer's memory and putting that information also in here. So I'm calling the canvas. Oops. This is too eager to fill in this information. So canvas. And now if you see this kind of drop down in here, you need to press escape button in this case. And now you can add dot in here. Otherwise it chooses some of those long words in there and places it in here. So need to be careful with that. So this means that, sorry, actually we don't have anything called canvas. We have something which is called B, but maybe I start to call that one as well as a canvas. Sorry for this. Same thing, just change the name to be more reasonable, or trying to describe what is the idea of this div in here. So it's a canvas for our SVG. So now the SVG equals to that canvas, and now I'm pressing escape dot append. So we are adding something into that canvas, and that something is SVG. By the way, in Finland we are using these double quotes. But if you like, if you wish, you can also type with the like this, and then oops, single quotes as well. But I'm using double quotes. Okay, so Canvas Append SVG. Now I'm saving that one. And now if I check the elements in here, what we have body, we have div inside it. Div has ID canvas, and inside canvas we have empty SVG. So that's the way how the D3 builds up the structure for the pages. We are creating an empty SVG. We are giving a width and height for that. Then we are creating a space inside that SVG where we are drawing our graph and or chart, and then inside that space, which is spared for the graph, we are drawing, well, it can be bar chart or line chart or whatever the chart will be, but anyway, SVG, then the space for the drawing, the chart, and so on. Well, I'm not yet giving any dimensions in this. I'm making a few simple examples, and I'm getting removing the code from there and start from the empty page again, but just showing the basic things. Then I would like to have something inside this SVG. That's the reason why I created this thing. I have named this SVG, which was placed with this append method to the canvas. I have the information about this SVG now in here. And now I can say that SVG append like this, and then, for example, rectangle, rect. I copy that one. Oops. Command C. And the second one could be, for example, circle. And third one could be, for example, line. Okay, and again, what we have here, if we compare this one, we have simply div ID canvas in here, but in browser we have div, we have SVG, we have rectangle, circle, and line. So this part here, this is done with the JavaScript with the help of D3 library. Now if I would like to handle the rectangle or circle or line later on, I should make this kind of addition. So this is the const dot constant rect. So this is needed only in those cases that I need that information later on. And if I say save here, there is no difference between the previous state. So there is still empty rect, empty circle, empty line, even though I added these in here. Okay, but then each of these should have some attributes. So when I typed that or created that red circle with the black line around it, I added something called attributes, the width and height for the SVG, and then lots of attributes for the circle tag. And how to add an attribute from this JavaScript program, it happens like this. First of all, I would like to create an attributes for the SVG itself. I need to remove, because the semicolon in here, it says that now this line ends here, but I'm not going to end the thing in here, but I will continue with the attributes. An attribute method in D3 is called ATTR, shortened version from the word attribute. And I'm saying that I'm adding an attribute called height. Closing again this Explorer to have some more space. So I'm adding an attribute called height, and then after the name and those marks around it, I'm adding comma and then giving a value for that. For example, 600. Then I will continue by adding a new ATTR, and then this is width, and then comma and 600, like that. And now if we check again the whole thing, there has changed something because it gives that kind of bigger view or bigger space in there. So div, and now I have SVG with these two attributes in here. So that's the idea. Okay, so I will make the same thing to this rectangle. I remove the semicolon at the end of the line. I'm saying dot attr. What are the attributes that are needed for the rectangle? For example, X, that's the upper corner, upper left corner of the rectangle. And I'm giving the value which is 0. And then dot attr, next attribute which is y, comma 0 for this one as well. By the way, now when I have a limited space in here, I can also make it like this. I can change the line from that point. So X will be on its own line, Y the same thing. Then ATTR there is more of these. Rectangle needs to have width and comma, let's say, for example, 200. Enter ATTR. And of course that dot at the front. And height. Well, 75, for example. And then the fill color. So ATTR. Then fill, comma. And now, because the color will be in a text form, it needs to be in those quotation marks inside of them. Let's say, for example, blue. Now I will end that, well, section or line with the semicolon, like that. And the same thing with the circle and same thing with the line and so on, but let's play only with that. So that was the first example about how to use the append and attribute methods. Then we jump to the next video.